All right, YouTube, it's time to discuss the idea of a basic income. It's getting more popular in Europe. It is being implemented. I can't remember. I think it was Finland or one of these Scandinavian countries guaranteeing a basic income for all citizens. The idea is that you provide every person in your country with an unconditional sum of money, uh, which allows them to live on a rudimentary subsistence. Essentially, they can afford some sort of cheap housing and they can put food in their bellies and they have electricity and heat and stuff like that. Um, my first thought is, well, that sounds like socialism to me, but then I'm reminded quite quickly of the fact that we already have a lot of socialized welfare in this country. I think it could work. I say this as a libertarian. I know that must astonish some people here, but I don't see a problem with a small proportion of the economy being meted out directly to the whole population. I don't even care if it's collectivist in the shape and form of being absolutely equal between people. I think that libertarianism works more easily if you have equality of possibility. That's one of the basic tenets of libertarianism. It's not equality of outcome. It's not everyone has to be equal at the end of their paycheck. It's everyone should have the equal opportunity. For a lot of people, especially in areas where poverty is deeply entrenched, they don't really have that equal opportunity. Libertarians can't turn a blind eye to the fact that systemic government corruption, and it was the government, let's face it, and in many ways corporate corruption, really created a lot of drastic problems within the United States. So you don't really have equal education. You'll have one like inner city school where people just sort of muddle through and they pass everybody, or half of them drop out before they hit like ninth grade. Then you have the white picket fence area with a top-notch school, and then you have sort of the trust funder schools that are even better, where the kids are like trilingual by the time they graduate, and even then they're considered average among their peers. We don't really have equality of nourishment in the country. I would say when we're talking about the young especially, if you want a society built on liberty, you have to look after the lower class to some extent. You can't let people starve on the street, because if you do, it's going to create systemic inequality, which violates the very core principles of libertarianism. You will have a group of people who potentially will not be able to exercise their liberty because they don't have access to the things they need to do so. Even like the fact that some people still can't afford access to the internet is a little bit of a problem. What does this say about the free exchange of ideas? The internet's basically a microcosm of the exchange of ideas across the entire world. Now, I'm not going to go all commie on you here, because my idea would be quite simple. Scrap every welfare program in the country, EBT, WIC, unemployment benefits, everything, in favor of a universal income. Cut all of those federal bureaucracies and you save billions and billions of dollars a year. Have one bureau, one single alphabet soup agency handling the doling out of this universal, unconditional, poverty line or sub-poverty line income, so that people don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. Instead of allowing the government to pick and choose based on financial situation, race, gender, whatever it happens to be. Instead of allowing Uncle Sam the power to choose who gets some sort of government handout, so that you end up with both have and have-nots, but then you also have take and take-nots, which really creates a lot of problems. It creates a lot of vice between different groups of people in the country. The middle class, oh, those poor people taking more of our money. The poor people, oh, the middle class doesn't know how good they have it. Instead of having that situation where you have people who are perpetually disenfranchised and you have billions and billions of dollars being pumped into tens of thousands of bureaucrats to dole out all these different kinds of welfare with all the forms attendant to them and all the fucking paperwork and all the write-offs and all the regulations and all that bullshit that all costs money and strangulates the system, slim it down to a single fucking piece of paper where people can take their universal income. It doesn't matter what level it's at. It doesn't matter whether we're talking half of poverty line or at poverty line or poverty line plus 20% or any of these other weird arbitrary figures the government makes. If you can eliminate all other forms of welfare by doing so, it's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper. a hell of a lot cheaper. You won't have to provide for so many bureaucrats that all make, upper incomes, let's face it. The fucking janitor of the IRS probably makes $30 an hour and is unionized. So eliminate all that crap. Slim it down, it becomes more efficient. There's a lot less paperwork, a lot less people that need to be involved with handling it. And no, it shouldn't matter. And if somebody wants to write off their universal income, if someone feels they don't need it, they already have a 7-figure salary, let them check a box on this form that everyone files each year with their taxes or whatever, to say, well, I give it up. I'll donate it to this fund, or that, I'll donate it to the children's fund, or I'll donate it to, PETA or something like that. And let them do that. That's all you have to do. Now, to those who would say, well, this reeks, you have to pay for this with tax money. Yeah, I understand that. You shouldn't be providing for it by property taxes, income taxes, and stuff like that, unless you're talking about a flat income tax. Should be taken care of by business taxes. Now, when I say business taxes as a libertarian, I don't say, oh, well, screw the corporations, they need to pay people more, marks forever. I'm saying make them compete on an even playing field. Right now, the liberals get it fundamentally correct, but they misdiagnose the disease. They only understand the symptoms. The symptom is corporations pay little to nothing in taxes. The cause, though, the actual disease, is that the way the corporate tax rate is structured, you need lawyers and accountants to make sure that you account for everything your business buys so you can write it off and pay nothing in taxes. Because on paper, it makes it look like your business is struggling to pay for all the things that it needs. And, after we paid this payroll and we bought this piece of equipment and stuff, and these are all necessary for our business, we can't afford to pay any taxes. Now, do you think I, as an entrepreneur, as a self-employed individual, taxed at a business tax rate, or the mom and pop bookstore can hire an army of lawyers and accountants to do that? The answer, of course, is no, and you'll get audited by the IRS if you try to write off too much anyway. You think the IRS is going to audit Walmart? You think they're going to audit Target? You think they're going to audit Chick-fil-A or any of these other groups? Of course not. That's how they get away with it. If they're actually paying the fair tax rate that they're supposed to pay, even if it's massively decreased from the actual outstanding total they're supposed to be paying, we're talking, nobody's asking them to pay 30% of their business proceeds, but slim it down massively, you could pay for a guaranteed income for all Americans by virtue of that. This helps with the quality of possibility is more easily taken care of by such a straight system, such a streamlined, straight up, thinned down, bureaucrat unfriendly system. More user-friendly, more bureaucrat unfriendly. We know bureaucrats and humans are two different things. That is much easier to use than the bloated, massive, convoluted pile of shit welfare system we have now. And by the way, the welfare system we're using now doesn't lift people up out of poverty anyway. You give them a guaranteed income. Hopefully they're using that to stabilize their lifestyle while they attempt to climb their way up. And by slimming down the business tax rate, it'll be a hell of a lot easier for them to do that. Entrepreneurs will blossom all over the country. By the tens of thousands, they'll rise up in ranks and they'll actually attempt to expand. Right now, for a lot of these people that are on the cusp of having to pay the maximum corporate tax rate, they're not going to bother expanding their small business or entrepreneurship or whatever, because they know if they do, they get screwed. They're trying to keep it small and on the down low while they work their regular job, and they just sort of do it on the side. Nobody's really plunging themselves in. You get a lot of geniuses in the country that aren't going to take the plunge. They're not actually going to open up the brick and mortar shop. They're not actually going to file that patent for something they think can make millions of dollars. They just don't want the hassle of it. Even if they're hopeful about their chances of doing so, the amount of regulations and fees and paperwork and bureaucrats they have to go through, wall after wall after wall of bureaucrats, it's like an endless legion of them. They're not going to bother doing that. Streamline the system. Get rid of the worthless alphabet soup nonsense. We can do this with surveillance too. We can do it with military contracts. We can literally do it with anything. Inject capitalism back into the system. Wealth will increase, and you'll be paying less overall to people with a guaranteed income. Much less than we pay out in the current welfare system, which has to be administered by literally tens or hundreds of thousands of well-paid fat cat bureaucrats. So yeah, I'm tacitly in favor of a guaranteed income, but here's the one reservation. Asking the government to administer such a program with common sense, decency, fairness, and in such a way that it does not become bloated and convoluted is very difficult. It would require an enormous amount of effort to actually impose such a thing while stripping existing welfare, sacred cows of the left. You have to get rid of all of them. I'm not talking about get rid of just WIC or just EBT. I'm talking you no longer need those programs. Everyone's got a guaranteed income. You can slim down the tax rate attendant to this, but if that's not done, then paying for the program will be a hassle. So that would have to be done as well. You'd need essentially a libertarian tax program, one in which it's very limited, it's business friendly, and I mean small businesses and entrepreneurs as well as corporations. The multinationals are going to have to actually compete for once, which means Walmart will probably go out of business because someone else will dream up a better model. They'll pay their workers a couple dollars more an hour, they'll hold their prices down lower, and soon Walmart gets fucked and a new corporation is born that actually gives a damn about people. See, we've lost this in the sort of globalist movement. We've really lost the concept of the mom and pop chain, of having the smiling dude that pumps your gas for you, of people stacking oranges in the grocery store. That just doesn't happen anymore. Nobody in those corporations gives a damn about their job other than the paycheck that they get. They got no pride in their work, and I don't blame them for having no pride in their work. There's no reason to have any pride in their work. They're being abused every day by the business they work for, generally speaking. It's not a socialist thing to say. Corporations are anathema to libertarianism. They abuse everybody that's connected with them if they think they can screw people, and they're screwing the entire American public, partially because the politicians enabled them to do so. By the way, I don't even blame the corporations for doing that. If you can get away with paying no taxes, why would you want to pay them? Slim down the tax code, make it fair, which we haven't had in a long time. Replace all existing welfare with a flat, guaranteed income for every American citizen. It'll be cheaper to administer, trust me. And a lot of our animosity, the problems between like lower class, especially like minority lower class and middle class, the working poor versus the white collar workers, the upper crust versus the middle class and so forth, that sort of disappears. And you have more equality of possibility, not equality of outcome. You can choose to squander that basic income on whatever. You can buy booze with it if you want. You're an idiot if you do. You can sit there in your cheap-ass apartment and drink until your liver is pickled. Or you can use some of that to invest. You can start a business. You can buy better food. You can get in shape. You can, you can do whatever you want to do with it. Some people will take it and do great things. Others will waste it. But the government shouldn't be in the business of telling people, well, if you're not going to use your money in the ways we think you ought to use it for your own advancement, then you don't get it. No. If you have that instituted into a basic income, it's not a basic income anyway. And it's just the government absorbing more power. That's another problem. The federal government, if administering such a thing, would probably try to do what it does with road funds, which is it would have a bunch of regulations. States would have to do certain things to get the guaranteed income for their citizens. Citizens would have, they'd have to submit to a monthly drug check or some bullshit like that, which is just more creeping statism, in which case I would be squarely against such a proposed bill. But the basic idea can work. It can. It's a pragmatic solution to the problem. We can't simply cut people off and let them starve in the streets. But at the same time, do we need the bloated bureaucracy we've got now, which comes attendant with a million different regulations, like 1,000 volumes of laws? No, of course not. And we don't need to pay those bureaucrats. We would only need a few thousand people to administer the entire country's basic income system. It's just a fucking mailing list. There's where you mail the check. Here's how many people are there, and here's what the final total is. Yeah, there'd be a guaranteed income for those who are still minors. It could be put in a fund for them so that when they fucking graduate, they get enough to pay their way through college. They can start a business. They can buy a car. They can go on a tour of the world, write a book, whatever they happen to want to do with it. It's fundamentally a great idea, even if we're talking about sub-poverty line levels of income, which is not much and would cost a hell of a lot less than our current welfare system. Yes, it can work. The main problem is bureaucracy. Get rid of that, and there's no problem funding such a program. Even if we're talking about a couple $1,000s a year that people just get for being U.S. citizens, I see no problem with that. I don't see it as collectivism. I don't see it as socialism. I see socialism as the central authority of all the bureaus that administer the current program. You have one bureau, one very small bureau doing it. That's not as much of a problem, but you have to keep it slim. You have to keep it efficient. It has to be a well-oiled, very small, powerful machine. That's about all. Peace out.